Hi there. So this is a short video to go through setting up a connection using ServiceNow Webhooks as the source. So to start with, we create our connection. So from the bottom right-hand corner here, we click the green plus button, and we're looking for this option here, ServiceNow Webhooks. If we were just doing normal ServiceNow, not using a webhook, then we would select the ServiceNow icon here, but we're using webhooks, so ServiceNow WH. We select that, and then we select our target system. If you're sending it, for example, getting that data out into a CSV file or something like that, you might choose something like Drive. But in this example, we're going to be moving data into Salesforce. So let's select Salesforce and we click Apply. And the next thing we do is we have to authenticate our ServiceNow credentials, and then we click Apply. Then the next thing we do is we choose the type that we're using in ServiceNow that we're pulling data from. So I'm going to use incident and apply. Then we need to authenticate to Salesforce and apply. And then we can decide if we want to use the bulk API or not. I'm going to leave that set as is, and then we're going to click apply. Then we can give a name and a description and a few tags to help us find that connection at another time. So once we've got that in here, we can choose how long we want to keep our log retention, which will help us with error management and things like that. I'm going to retain the max number of logs, and let's keep that to the last 7 runs, because I'm going to run this daily and I want to keep the last week's worth. So let's create this. Now the next thing we do here is we go to the mapping. So let's go and have a look at that. So here we are in a very simple mapping that we've created earlier. And what we're doing is we're using that incident to create an opportunity in our Salesforce instance. So when somebody creates an incident and asks for help or they need a new laptop or something like that, that can move through to an opportunity in Salesforce. So we need our opportunity. So to do that, we just add opportunity from here and select add section. Now we've already done this here, which is why you see opportunity down here as our tab in our mapping. Now, what we need to do with an opportunity is we also need to join that to an account in Salesforce. Now, I don't necessarily have the account ID in our ServiceNow environment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a find on an account section. So we added the account simply by choosing account from the list here and then clicking add section, and then that gave us our account in here. And by the way, you can reorder these if needs be, because CONVAYR will work along this workflow in sequential order. So sometimes it's important to do something with one object before you then move to the next object, and you can move these around as well. So in here, we're going to find our existing, didn't like me moving it there, so we'll just get rid of that. So we're going to find an existing account record in our Salesforce environment. So I'm going to select find from the section action, where the account name is company. This is coming from our incident, the fields on our incident in ServiceNow. Obviously there needs to be a match there, but let's assume that there is. And then what do we do if we find multiple records that that match that particular value here? If we want to, we can add additional filters to drill down to make sure we find an individual record to work with. Then over on the right, we can choose what we want to do if we find an error or there's a problem. Do we want to stop processing completely, or do we just want to move on to the next section? I'm going to stop processing completely. And then if we want to, we can add conditions and things like that on here. But for now, this is all we need to do. Now, I've also included a field mapping in here of owner ID. And what this means is CONVAYR is going to find the existing account record in our target system, and it's going to return any field mappings that we include in this find. And to do that, you just simply hit Add Field Mapping and then choose the fields that you want from your target, and then you can bring that back into CONVAYR. So in this example, I've got owner ID, and I'm going to use that when I make my opportunity. I'm actually going to use that to be able to assign the opportunity to the same owner that owns that account record. So I've got owner ID in here, but if I wanted to add in any other field in here, I could just select it from here or add all of them. So we've got that in here, and that's all we need to do in our account. Then we move on to our opportunity. Now we're creating new records here. At the top, we've got our opportunity stage. So every time we do this with this particular connection, I actually want to set the stage of the opportunity to proposal price quote. And the way I did that, so we go into our field mapping. So we hit add field mapping, and you come to this screen where you choose your target field and your source field. However, in our source field, instead of choosing to map data from our incident, because those stages don't exist in ServiceNow, I selected expression, and then we defined the expression using a pick list, and CONVAYR will actually give us all of the pick list values for that particular field that we're mapping to, and will allow us to choose that and set that as our kind of expression that we're passing over. So I'm going to select proposal price quote. And then what you will see in here is if we go back to the mapping here, you'll see now that I've got stage and I've got proposal price quote mapped to that. So what that means is every time we create this opportunity, CONVAYR is going to use that value from the pick list and just put it as that particular value. And in this way, you can actually create data and do things to your data in your target system when you don't necessarily have that same data or no equivalent for it in your source system. Then we go on, we're going to pass over the SysID. So this is actually just the system ID for that particular incident. And we're going to pass that into a text field that we've added as a custom field in our opportunity object, so I can track it, and then that allows me, if I need to pass data then in another connection back from Salesforce as the source to ServiceNow as the target. It will allow me to match to that incident using that ID I'm pushing over into that field in this mapping. Then we've got our account here. So this is how we create the join to a particular object. So we just select relevant object in here, related object. So in this case, we've got account ID. And then instead of, we don't have an ID in the source data coming over, but we did the find. So what I'm going to do is to map and create that join to the relevant account. I'm going to say previous section up here, and then I'm going to select account ID. You'll also see it gives me the option to use the field that was returned in the find. And I'll show you how to use that in a little bit, but we just need the account ID. So that's created our join now to the relevant account. Here we're using that account owner ID we pulled back. And what we're doing is we're actually going to assign the owner of this opportunity to be the same person that owns that account. So in our field mapping here, we've got owner ID, previous section, and then we've got this owner ID that we brought back in the find. So that's pretty cool. Then we've got a few other things that we're mapping in here, such as date, the short description from the incident, mapping over to the name of the opportunity. We've got stage in here as well. So this is a duplicate of this one here. So that's because I made some changes to it. I don't actually need this anymore because we don't want a duplicate. So I'm just going to delete this field like so. Down here, we've got an opportunity type, which I'm actually using as existing customer replacement, which again is using a pick list value from my target source. And then I've got the contact ID. So this is joining the opportunity to the contact, and I've got that as my caller from ServiceNow. Now, obviously, this is all going to depend on the configuration that you have in your source and target system. So the environment that I'm using here is possibly going to be quite different with different fields and things like that to your environment. So that's something to be aware of. Obviously, you're going to map what's what's relevant based on your own environment for your source and target system. So that's our mapping here in the opportunity. Another thing that I will mention is dates quite often need some form of transformation when we're moving the data across, because the format of your source system doesn't match the format of your target system. So the way we do that is we can click on the value transform button here in the middle. And then we can just choose the source format that we've got. I'm not 100% sure what it is in my ServiceNow environment. So just for the purposes of demoing here, I'm going to show anyone here, and you can add your source time zone and target time zone here as well, and even generate an error if that doesn't work as well, or just ignore it and move on if that formatting doesn't work. In most cases, you probably want to generate an error. So that's our mapping, very, very simple. Now, the reason we go through the mapping first is because it allows us then to get to the activation part of a connection. So let's just apply this mapping here and then move back out. Now we want to do our activation. So let's just find our connection here. So I've just added a tag in the search area, and it's this one. So I want to look at activation. Now, because we're using a webhook here, obviously we're not going to activate it based on a schedule. So when you come into activation, normally you would see, based on to add your and create your schedule for when you want to run it, up to frequency of every 5 minutes. But obviously we're not doing it based on a schedule. We're using webhooks, which is why you see this in front of you. And we need this URL in order to configure the webhook in our ServiceNow environment. So all we're going to do here is just copy. So we click on this little icon to copy this URL into our clipboard. That's all we need to do there. And then we're going to move over to ServiceNow. So here we are in ServiceNow. And what we need to do is create a REST message. So we go to all and we type in REST message. We find our REST messages and we click new. And then in here, we just add our endpoint. That's the URL that we copied from the activation area in CONVAYR. Now, importantly, what we do is we actually just remove everything up to and including the URL, everything up to and including the question mark. And then we just give it a name. Now for authentication, we can leave this as no authentication. Now we are a lightweight webhook. We're not sending any data, so we can just leave this as no authentication. So we've removed that, and then we can just hit submit to create this REST message. And then the next thing I have to do is go back into it, and we have to create what's called an HTTP method. Now, ServiceNow has already done this for us and defaulted it to GET, but I just need to go in here. And then the next thing I need to do is move myself out of the way here, like this, is I'm just going to change this name to GET. And this is because CONVAYR looks for it based on the name. So we just want to make sure that it's right. So we're going to change that to GET. Now, all we need to do here is we go to HTTP request tab, and we need to insert a query parameter. We don't need to worry about the HTTP headers, but we just need to insert an HTTP query parameter. So we're going to insert a new row here, and we're going to call the name as ID. And then the value in here is going to be $. If I can find it on my keyboard, curly brace, ID, close curly brace. And that's all we need to do here. So we click update. And that's it. That's all we need to do here. We've got a REST endpoint with an HTTP method, and that's all we need to do for this section. So we're now done for step 1 of the 2-step process to create our webhook. The next thing we need to do is we create a business rule. So we find business rules in here, and then we're just going to create a new business rule. So let's give it a name. And then we're going to choose the table that we need, which is incident. Now, we do have to add a very, very small piece of code in here. And in order to do that, we need to select advanced. So we need to make sure that this tick box here for advanced is checked. And then when we toggle this advanced checkbox on, we get an advanced tab down here. Now we're not going to go to that tab just yet. We need to specify when to run this business rule. And in this example, we're going to use this as after create or after insert on the incident. Now, if for example, in our use case, we actually wanted to update information from an existing incident or something like that, then we could also do it on update. But what we need to do in our mapping is we'd probably want to have create or update in there. In our opportunity, we're just doing a create, but obviously if we wanted to do update as well with a webhook, then we'd want our mapping to be create or update. So obviously, you're then working on existing opportunities as well. And if we are going to do an update, then what we need to do is actually pass over the sysID from the incident to somewhere in our opportunity. And you saw that in the mapping. We just have a custom field, and then on create we can pass that sysID into that field, and then on update we can actually specify update the opportunity where the sysID of the incident matches the value in that sysID field that we updated in our create, and that's all we need to do so that we get that match on update as well. But just to keep it simple, we're just doing an insert for this one. And then we can move to advanced, where we just need to paste in a small amount of script. So we're just going to go to advanced here. And then we're going to just take that out and we're going to put in our script. So we've pasted in a few lines of script here, and that's all we need to do. And then we hit submit. So we can find our business rule here and go into it and edit it if we need to. But that's it for setting up a webhook with ServiceNow to work with CONVAYR. We are now ready to go. Thank you very much.